Have you ever wondered what truly makes you, you? From the flicker of a thought to the deepest emotion, it all begins within the intricate workings of your biological hardware. Join us on CSS Breakdown, book by book, season 07, episode 02, as we crack open Atkinson and Hilgard's Introduction to Psychology 15th edition. Welcome. Our mission in this deep dive, as always, is to really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge and insights from the source material, basically giving you a shortcut to being truly well-informed. And today, we're not just, listing facts. We're embarking on this really fascinating journey into the biological foundations of psychology, trying to reveal how understanding our inner machinery unlocks the secrets behind, well, everything, our perceptions, experiences, behaviors. It really is fascinating. And that journey, incredibly broad, and surprisingly interconnected. We'll try to eliminate how everything, from the subtle nuances of our senses, like think about that fascinating case of Stephen D. Yeah, his sense of smell became dramatically intensified, and it profoundly altered his whole emotional state, right? All the way to our ability to learn, remember, make complex decisions. It's all rooted in these intricate interactions within our nervous system. We're going to dive into the smallest building blocks, the neurons, and their lightning-fast communication. And we'll zoom out, look at the grand architecture of the brain itself and how it gives rise to our unique abilities, our quirks. And a key insight I think we'll explore is how ancient evolutionary systems might have been sort of co-opted for modern human stuff, like moral disgust, or even our really profound responses to social exclusion. Okay, let's start unpacking that with Stephen D. His story, told by Oliver Sacks, it's such a compelling example, isn't it? How just a shift in one sense, hyperosmia, this increased smell ability, can just dramatically alter emotional and cognitive experience.
Exactly. His intense smells were directly linked to this sense of melancholia, this desire to connect with everything.
Yeah, it really shows our perceptions, our emotions. They aren't just in our heads abstractly. They're deeply based on the activation of our nervous system.
And what's really striking there is the pathway for smell, for olfactory information. It's quite unique in the brain. Unlike vision or hearing, it gets transmitted pretty directly to brain areas handling emotion and motivation.
Okay, so that makes the feeling that comes with the smell much more immediate, visceral.
Precisely, more visceral. Now, this whole idea, understanding complex human experience through a biological lens, it might seem a bit mechanistic at first, like reducing us to biological machines. Even historically, figures like René Descartes, they grappled with this. He proposed mind-body dualism, didn't he? To account for, what he saw as the human soul's flexibility, something beyond just mechanics.
Right, that mechanistic view of Descartes, it feels, well, simplistic now. But it still touches on that crucial debate.
Yeah.
Are we just biological machines? Or is there something more? How does our current understanding from the source handle that tension?
Well, the reality, as the source material really emphasizes, it's far from just tubes and gears. It's this incredibly intricate dance of biological cells, neurons, communicating biochemically. And look, if our human experience is awe-inspiring, then the biological system making it possible must be just as complex and fascinating, right? The brain might just be the single most complex object we know. You could spend a lifetime just trying to understand one neuron, let alone the whole network.
Wow.
But speaking of complexity, our biology also carries these echoes of ancient solutions. That brings us to the concept of pre-adaptation.
Pre-adaptation.
Yeah.
Right. That's a powerful evolutionary idea. An existing system gets co-opted or maybe hijacked for a completely new function, like evolution finding new uses for old tools.
Exactly that. A classic example is, the mouth, teeth, tongue. They evolved for eating, obviously, but then they gained this entirely new function, producing sounds, language. But what's really remarkable is how this applies to our behavior. Paul Rozin, for instance, he proposes that moral disgust, that visceral reaction you get to something morally offensive. It could have actually developed from our basic distaste and disgust system, the one that evolved way back to protect us from poisonous food.
Huh. So the face we make.
Yeah, the physical disgust face Darwin described. It prevents stuff entering the mouth. And moral offenses, they elicit a remarkably similar emotional response.
That's a really strong parallel with moral disgust. But I can hear some people thinking, surely my revulsion to, say, a terrible act is more than just a gut response to bad food. How solid is that link? Is the biological root really that deep?
Well, the source notes that people instinctively shy away from someone they find morally offensive, almost like they have a contagious illness, much like they would with contaminated food. Remember that study with Adolf Hitler's sweater? People were incredibly averse to touching it, as if the moral offense itself was physically contaminating the object.
Wow, okay. That's quite visceral.
And another really compelling example of pre-adaptation is our response to social exclusion. Being part of a group is just critical for human survival, right? Social exclusion can threaten physical, emotional health. Research shows humans respond to social exclusion by becoming sort of indifferent, maybe numb to emotional pain. The pre-adaptation model suggests this is our physiological system for physical pain being co-opted.
So wait, that would predict that being socially excluded might actually change how you feel physical pain.
Exactly. It leads to that striking prediction. And experiments by Nathan DeWall and Roy Baumeister actually confirmed it. They had subjects threatened with a lonely future, compared them to a control group. And yeah, those threatened with loneliness showed higher physical pain thresholds and tolerance.
So the emotional numbness people report when ostracized, it might be a defense linked to the physical pain system.
It really suggests that, a common physiological system for both physical and social pain. And think about our language. We use words like nauseating for disgusting food and disgusting acts. We say it hurts for a physical injury and social rejection, and that's not just in English.
Fascinating. So at a fundamental level, our nervous system, which is divided into the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, somatic and autonomic, that system, underpins all these really profound human experiences.
Precise.
So, if the brain is this incredible orchestra, who are the individual musicians, to really get the symphony of the mind, we need to zoom way in, right? Far beyond what we can see, to the fundamental players, the neurons. These specialized cells, they're the basic units transmitting neural impulses. You've got the dendrites extending from the cell body, acting like antenna, receiving impulses. And the axon, this long, slender tube that transmits the messages away. And at the end, these tiny branches terminating in synaptic terminals or terminal buttons. But here's the mind-boggling part. These complex signals race through the brain, yet the neurons don't even touch each other. How does that invisible leap happen across the synapse?
That's where the real elegance of the system is. When that neural impulse reaches the terminal buttons, it triggers a release of a neurotransmitter, a chemical messenger. This chemical diffuses across that tiny synaptic gap and stimulates the next neuron, transmitting the impulse. And think about this. A single neuron can receive input from literally thousands of others, integrating all that information.
Thousands.
Wow. And while they come in many shapes and sizes, neurons generally fall into three functional types. Sensory neurons bring info in from receptors to the central nervous system. Motor neurons carry signals out from the CNS to muscles and glands. And then inner neurons connect them, forming these incredibly complex circuits.
Okay, so how does the impulse itself, the neural impulse, travel along the neuron? It's an electrochemical thing, right? An action potential.
Exactly, an action potential. Think of it like a carefully choreographed wave of electrical charge that sprints down the axon. It's a ballet of charged molecules, ions, opening and closing tiny gates in the cell membrane.
And what's astonishing isn't just how it happens, but that all-or-none nature. It's like a light switch, fully on or fully off. Yet somehow this simple binary system underlies the incredible complexity of every thought we have.
It does, and the importance of those ion channels, those tiny gates, is really highlighted by things like, say, Novocaine.
The dentist's favorite.
Right. It works precisely by preventing sodium channels from opening, which effectively stops pain signals from reaching the brain. So a neuron at rest maintains this negative charge inside. It's held steady by ion pumps. But when stimulation from other neurons pushes its electrical potential past a critical threshold, the cell membrane temporarily destabilizes. You get this rapid reversal of charge. Positively charged sodium ions flood in, causing that sudden spike, the action potential. Then potassium ions rush out, restoring the balance.
And this whole thing takes just milliseconds.
Just mere milliseconds. That's the action potential.
And once it starts, it just keeps going down the axon like a wave.
Does it go backwards?
No, it propagates itself down the axon, and it only moves in one direction because of a brief refractory period right after firing where that part of the membrane can't fire again immediately. The speed varies a lot, though, from a slow crawl to a blazing fast, maybe 120 meters per second.
Wow. What makes it go faster?
That speed is largely influenced by the myelin sheath. It's this insulating layer made of glial cells that wraps around many axons.
Like insulation on a wire.
Kind of. And these myelin sheaths allow for what's called saltatory conduction. The impulse literally jumps from one gap in the sheath, called a node of Ranvier, to the next, significantly speeds up transmission.
Which explains why diseases like multiple sclerosis, which attack the myelin sheath, cause such severe problems with movement and thinking.
Exactly. It disrupts that fast, efficient communication.
It's pretty striking, though, that in terms of communication, firing an action potential is all a neuron can really do. It's all or none, either fires full strength or not at all, like binary ones and E's.
It is.
Yeah.
Which raises that big question. How can such a simple on-off mechanism code for the sheer complexity of our experiences? Distinguishing colors, composing symphonies? Well, one key way is through frequency coding. A single neuron can increase its firing rate as a stimulus gets more intense.
Okay, so firing faster means more. Right. Another way is population coding, simply involving a greater number of neurons. And even the synchronization of their firing carries meaning. But the real power, it lies in the vast, complex, and incredibly dynamic connections between all those individual neurons.
So the action potential reaches the terminal buttons. Then what happens with the neurotransmitters?
Right. They're released from little storage sacs called synaptic vesicles into that synaptic gap.
Okay.
They then drift across and bind to specific receptors on the receiving neuron. It's very much like a lock and key. A specific neurotransmitter fits a specific receptor.
And that binding changes the next neuron.
It changes the permeability of ion channels in the receiving neuron. This can be excitatory, making the neuron more likely to fire, or inhibitory, making it less likely to fire.
And the neuron just adds it all up.
Essentially, yes. It integrates all these inputs, excitatory and inhibitory. If the excitatory signals outweigh the inhibitory ones enough to reach that critical threshold, bang, it fires its own action potential.
Got it. But the signal needs to be brief, right? Otherwise, it would just keep going.
Absolutely. To maintain precise control, the action of neurotransmitters has to be brief. This happens in one of two ways, either through reuptake, where the sending neuron basically sucks the neurotransmitter back up,
Recycling?
pretty much, or through degradation, where specific enzymes in the synaptic gap chemically break down the neurotransmitter.
And there are lots of these neurotransmitters.
Oh yes, over 70 identified so far, each with diverse effects depending on the receptor type it binds to. For instance, acetylcholine. Hugely important for memory and attention. Its decline is notably linked to Alzheimer's disease, which really shows its impact on cognition. It also transmits signals to muscles, so drugs affecting it can cause paralysis, like botulinum toxin.
Botox.
That's the one. Or an uncontrolled buildup, like with some nerve gases. Very powerful stuff.
Then there's dopamine. That's the one often linked to pleasure, reward, addiction pathways.
Right. That's right. And imbalances here are implicated in really serious conditions. Too much dopamine is associated with schizophrenia symptoms, while too little is seen in Parkinson's disease.
Which is why schizophrenia drugs often block dopamine receptors.
Yeah.
And L-DOPA for Parkinson's aims to increase dopamine levels. Makes sense.
Then you have serotonin, plays a huge role in mood regulation. Low levels are associated with depression.
Like Prozac. Isn't that a serotonin drug?
Exactly. Prozac and similar drugs are serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. They increase serotonin levels in the synapse by blocking that recycling, that reuptake. Serotonin's also involved in sleep, appetite, even used in treatments for bulimia.
Okay. What about others?
Well, think of glutamate as the brain's main accelerator, the primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It's vital for learning and memory, particularly active in carving new memories through NMDA receptors, especially in the hippocampus.
So glutamate speeds things up. Is there a break?
Absolutely. That would be GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. It's the brain's major inhibitory neurotransmitter, the ultimate brake. Drugs that alleviate anxiety, like Valium or Xanax, benzodiazepines, they work by enhancing GABA's activity, calming things down, which is why blocking GABA receptors can actually lead to convulsions. You lose that crucial inhibitory control. It's all about maintaining that delicate balance.
Okay, so that's the micro level. What about the grand architecture, the brain itself? How do we even start to organize it?
Well, we can think about its structure in a few ways. The most common divides it into three main regions just based on location. The hindbrain, closest to the spinal cord, the midbrain, sort of tucked in the middle, and the forebrain, the big part at the front. There's also a really powerful functional view proposed by Paul MacLean. He saw the brain in three concentric layers, almost like evolutionary additions.
Layers, how so?
He described a central core for kind of primitive behaviors, basic survival stuff. Then wrapped around that, the limbic system, dealing more with emotions. And finally, the cerebrum on top, responsible for higher intellectual processes.
Interesting. Let's stick with the location-based view for now. The hindbrain, sitting right on top of the spinal cord. What's its job?
Crucial for basic life functions. Things that keep us alive without thinking about it. It includes the medulla, which controls breathing and posture reflexes, things like that. and the pons, which is important for attentiveness and timing of sleep stages. And critically, it's here in the brainstem area that nerve tracks cross over, connecting the right side of the brain to the left side of the body and vice versa.
Ah, the crossover point.
Yes. And you also have the reticular formation, this network of neurons extending up from the brainstem. It acts like a fundamental filter for sensory messages, controlling our overall arousal and awareness, kind of like a gatekeeper for consciousness.
Okay. What about the cerebellum, that bumpy bit at the back? I always think of it for movement.
Traditionally, yes, coordinating movement. Damage there results in jerky, uncoordinated actions. But what's surprising and increasingly clear is that the cerebellum also plays a significant role in learning new motor responses. And particularly in humans, it seems to be involved in things like language, planning, reasoning, likely due to its extensive connections with frontal brain areas. It's doing more than we used to think.
Okay, moving up then. The midbrain.
Relatively small in humans compared to other animals, it contains structures vital for relaying sensory information, particularly vision and hearing, and also involved in movement control. Importantly, it houses the substantia nigra, a crucial part of the dopamine reward pathway. This is the area that notoriously deteriorates in Parkinson's disease.
Oh, yeah, and then the forebrain. That's the big one in humans.
By far the largest part, especially the cerebrum. It basically covers the midbrain and parts of the hindbrain like a cap. Its outer layer, that wrinkled surface, is the cerebral cortex. Absolutely critical for pretty much all complex psychological functions, thinking, perceiving, language.
And beneath the cortex.
You have key subcortical structures, like the thalamus, which acts as a central sensory relay station. Almost all incoming information from the senses gets directed through the thalamus to the correct areas of the cerebrum, like a switchboard operator.
Okay. And below that, the hypothalamus. Sounds important.
It's much smaller than the thalamus, but incredibly vital. Despite its size, it regulates fundamental motivated behaviors, eating, drinking, sexual behavior. It also maintains homeostasis, our body's internal balance, regulating temperature, blood pressure. It also plays a key role in emotions and stress responses. And interestingly, it even contains specific areas that, when stimulated electrically, can produce intense feelings of pleasure or quite unpleasant sensations.
Wow. And the hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland too, right? The master gland.
Exactly. It exerts profound control over the pituitary, which then produces many different hormones and controls other endocrine glands throughout the body. A crucial link between the nervous system and the endocrine system.
Okay, so surrounding the central core, you mentioned the limbic system.
Yes, wrapping around the central core. This system adds a crucial layer of control over those more instinctive behaviors governed by the brainstem and hypothalamus, things like feeding, attacking, fleeing, mating. It allows for much more flexibility, especially in mammals. A key part of the limbic system is the hippocampus, critically important for forming new explicit memories, facts, and events.
Ah, like the famous patient HM who had his hippocampus removed.
Precisely. He couldn't form new memories after the surgery, though his older memories were intact. A tragic but incredibly informative case about the hippocampus's role.
And the limbic system is involved in emotion too.
Deeply involved, the amygdala, this almond-shaped structure, is particularly critical for emotions, especially fear. Damage to it can lead to a marked reduction in fear responses, or even an inability to recognize fear in other people's faces.
Okay, so let's get to the top layer then, the cerebral cortex itself, wrinkly outer layer, two halves.
Yep, composed of two hemispheres left and right, connected by a massive bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. Each hemisphere is further divided into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal. Each lobe performing diverse, though interconnected, functions.
Let's break those down. The lobes have specific jobs.
Broadly speaking, yes, though there's massive integration. In the frontal lobe, towards the back, you have the primary motor area. This controls voluntary movements with, remember, the right hemisphere controlling the left side of the body and vice versa.
Got it. Motor control. What about senses?
Just behind the motor area, crossing into the parietal lobe, is the primary somatosensory area. This receives information about sensory experiences like heat, cold, touch, pain, again from the opposite side of the body. And what's remarkable here is the mapping. The amount of cortex dedicated to a body part relates directly to its sensitivity and how much we use it for fine control.
So, like, our hands and lips get more brain space?
Much more than, say, our back. A raccoon's forepaws, used for intricate manipulation, have a huge cortical representation compared to a dog's paws.
Makes sense. Where's vision processed?
That's primarily in the occipital lobe, right at the back of the brain. The primary visual area receives input from both eyes, but due to the way the pathways cross, the left visual field goes to the right hemisphere and the right visual field to the left.
And hearing.
That's mainly processed in the primary auditory area, located on the side in the temporal lobe. It analyzes complex auditory signals like speech, and again, there are stronger connections from the opposite ear, though both ears project to both sides.
Okay, so we have motor areas, sensory areas. What about the rest of the cortex? There's a lot left over.
Ah, those are the association areas. These are the areas that aren't purely sensory or purely motor. They're involved in integrating information, in higher-level processing. The frontal association areas, for example, particularly the prefrontal cortex right at the front, are hugely important for things like planning, decision-making, working memory, aspects of personality. Damage here can lead to profound changes in behavior and judgment.
Right, like the Phineas Gage case.
Classic example. And posterior association areas are often linked to specific senses involved in perception and memory related to that sense. Damage to the lower part of the temporal lobe, for instance, can impair the ability to recognize objects or faces, even if basic vision is fine.
And how do researchers figure all this out? We can't just poke around in living brains, usually.
Well, historically, a lot came from studying patients with brain damage, like Gage, or from postmortem dissections. But now we have amazing non-invasive techniques. Things like EEG measures electrical activity, ERPs look at brain waves related to specific events, PET scans track metabolically active areas using radioactive tracers, and fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, detects changes in blood flow, giving detailed pictures of brain activity during tasks, all without causing distress.
Incredible tools. Now, you mentioned the two hemispheres. They look symmetrical, but are they really the same?
Not at all. While they look like mirror images, they have distinct specializations, a concept called lateralization. The left hemisphere is often slightly larger and seems to have more shorter neural fibers, good for localized processing. The right tends to have longer fibers connecting more widely separated areas.
And language is mostly on the left.
For most people, yes. Much of what we know about the brain's language mechanisms comes from studying patients with brain damage, particularly those with aphasia, language disorders. As early as 1861, Paul Broca found that damage in a specific area of the left frontal lobe, now called Broca's area, resulted in problems with speech production.
So they understand language but can't speak fluently.
Exactly. They suffer from expressive aphasia. Speech is slow, laborious, often just keywords like a telegram. But their comprehension is usually remarkably intact.
And there's another area.
Yes, in 1874, Carl Wernicke identified an area in the left temporal lobe, Wernicke's area, linked to language comprehension. Patients with damage here have receptive aphasia. They can often produce words fluently, grammatically correct sentences even, but the speech can be meaningless, jargon, and they have great difficulty understanding spoken or written language.
So Broca's area for speaking, Wernicke's for understanding. Is it that simple?
Well, the classical Wernicke-Geschman model, built on these ideas, suggested Broca stores articulatory codes, Wernicke stores auditory codes and meanings, and another area, the angular gyrus, connects written words to auditory codes. It helps explain many deficits. But like most things in the brain, it's probably more complex, more distributed, involving wider networks. Still, these areas are undeniably crucial.
The most dramatic insights into the hemispheres came from split brain research, didn't they? Roger Sperry's work.
Absolutely groundbreaking work won him a Nobel Prize. In very severe epilepsy cases, sometimes surgeons would sever the corpus callosum, that main connection between the hemispheres, to stop seizures spreading from one side to the other.
Cutting the communication line.
Exactly. And these split-brain patients provided this unique, incredible window into how the hemispheres function independently. Remember, left hemisphere controls the right body visual field, and usually speech. Right hemisphere controls the left body visual field.
So what happened in Sperry's experiments?
Fascinating dissociations. For example, if you flash the word "nute" very briefly just to the left side of their visual field, that information goes only to the right hemisphere. The patient could then use their left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, to feel around under a screen and correctly pick out a nut from other objects.
Okay, so the right brain knew it was a nut.
Yes. But if you ask the patient what word they saw, they'd say nothing. Why? Because the speech center is primarily in the left hemisphere, and the left hemisphere simply didn't see the word knew. It's like the right hemisphere knew but couldn't talk, and the left hemisphere could talk but didn't know.
Wow, two minds in one head almost. Does the right hemisphere have any language ability?
It does have some, yes. It can typically recognize simple words, maybe understand simple instructions. It can even guide the left hand to write words. Sometimes words the speaking left hemisphere isn't consciously aware were just written. It's not entirely nonverbal.
So these studies really confirm distinct specializations. Left for language, math.
Generally, yes. The left hemisphere excels at language, logical analysis, mathematical computations. The right hemisphere, while understanding some simple language, really shines in spatial tasks, pattern recognition, emotional processing, music perception. It's often considered more holistic or intuitive.
But it's crucial to remember, right, that in a normal brain, with the corpus callosum intact, the two hemispheres are constantly talking to each other, seamlessly integrating.
Absolutely critical point. As one researcher put it, there's really no activity in which only one hemisphere is involved or to which only one hemisphere makes a contribution. It's a constant dynamic collaboration. The whole left brain, right brain personality thing is a vast oversimplification.
Good clarification. Okay, moving away from the brain itself, what about the rest of the nervous system, the autonomic system?
Right, the autonomic nervous system, or ANS. It's a division of the peripheral nervous system outside the brain and spinal cord, and it elegantly controls all our involuntary functions: heart rate, digestion, breathing rate, perspiration, pupil dilation, stuff that just happens. It operates through two main divisions that often have opposing or antagonistic actions. First, the sympathetic nervous system. Think of this as our fight-or-flight system.
The accelerator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gets activated during intense arousal, emergencies, stress. It prepares the body for action, increases heart rate, redirects blood flow to muscles, releases energy stores.
And the other division.
That's the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the rest and digest system. It generally acts to calm the body down, conserve resources, and restore energy during periods of rest and recovery. Slows heart rate, stimulates digestion.
So they work in balance.
Constantly.
Right.
This delicate balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems is what maintains the body's internal equilibrium, its homeostasis, under varying conditions.
And closely related to this is the endocrine system, right? The hormone system.
Very closely related, yes. The endocrine system is a slower-acting communication system, but its effects can be much more widespread and longer-lasting. It consists of glands that secrete chemical messengers called hormones directly into the bloodstream.
And these hormones travel around the body.
They travel through the bloodstream to other parts of the body where they act on specific target cells that have receptors for them. We already mentioned the pituitary gland, the master gland, controlled by the hypothalamus. It produces hormones that regulate growth and also controls many other endocrine glands.
Like the adrenal glands. They're important for stress.
Vital. The adrenal glands, sitting on top of the kidneys, secrete hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. These are crucial for the stress response, preparing the body for emergencies, very similar effects to sympathetic nervous system activation. They also significantly influence mood and energy levels.
Wait, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Aren't those also neurotransmitters?
Excellent point. Yes, some chemicals, like these two, function as both neurotransmitters, carrying messages rapidly across the tiny synaptic gap between neurons, and as hormones, traveling more slowly but widely through the bloodstream to affect many cells simultaneously. It really highlights the intricate overlapping communication systems our bodies use. Super efficient.
Okay, so nervous system, endocrine system. What about the deeper influences? Evolution and genetics, how do they fit into the biological foundations?
They're fundamental. Natural selection, the process described by Charles Darwin, has profoundly shaped not only our physical structures, but also our behaviors and the underlying brain mechanisms that produce them. Behaviors that increase survival and reproduction tended to get passed down. Then you have the field of behavior genetics, which specifically studies how heredity, our genes, influences behavioral characteristics, things like mental ability, personality traits, temperament, even susceptibility to certain disorders.
So when we look at a behavior, we need to think about how it happens now and also why it evolved.
Exactly. We need to consider both proximate causes, the immediate mechanisms, how a behavior is generated, like the firing of specific neurons for a reflex, and ultimate causes, the evolutionary explanations, why a behavior exists in terms of its adaptive value, its contribution to survival and reproduction in our evolutionary past.
Can you give an example?
Sure, take male aggression. It tends to be more pronounced in males across many mammal species. The proximate causes involve things like testosterone levels influencing specific brain circuits. But the ultimate cause, from an evolutionary perspective, is that in many species, aggressive behavior among males competing for mates was adaptive. It conferred reproductive success, favoring the perpetuation of genes that contribute to that aggression. This is a classic example of sexual selection traits that boost reproductive success get selected for.
Got it. So let's talk genes. They're the basic units of heredity, segments of DNA.
That's right. Genes are segments of DNA molecules, and these DNA molecules are packaged into structures called chromosomes located in the nucleus of each cell. Humans typically have 46 chromosomes, arranged in 23 pairs, one set of 23 from each parent. Each gene essentially provides coded instructions, usually for manufacturing a specific protein. And proteins do most of the work in cells, acting as enzymes, building structures, and so on.
Do all genes work all the time?
No, and that's key. While virtually all cells in your body carry the same full set of genes, only a small percentage of those genes are active or expressed in any given cell type at any given time. This allows for incredible specialization, why a neuron is different from a liver cell, for example.
And genes come in pairs, right? One from mom, one from dad. Dominant and recessive.
Yep. You get two copies, or alleles, of most genes. They can be the same or different. If they're different, one might be dominant, meaning its effect is expressed, while the other is recessive, its effect only showing up if you inherit two copies of it. Eye color is a classic example. The gene for brown eyes is dominant over the gene for blue.
So a brown-eyed person can still carry the blue-eye gene.
Exactly. If both parents carry the recessive blue-eye gene, even if they both have brown eyes, they could have a blue-eyed child.
And sometimes just one gene can have a huge impact, like with certain diseases.
Absolutely. Some disorders are caused by a defect in a single gene, like phenylketonuria, PKU, an inherited inability to metabolize specific amino acid, phenylalanine. If untreated with diet early on, it causes severe brain damage. Or Huntington's disease, a devastating degenerative neurological disorder caused by a single dominant gene. If you inherit that one gene, you will develop the disease.
And sex-linked traits, like color blindness.
Right, those are traits influenced by genes carried on the sex chromosomes, usually the X chromosome. Since males only have one X chromosome, XY, while females have two XX, recessive traits on the X chromosome, like red-green color blindness, are much more likely to be expressed in males.
But most human characteristics aren't determined by just one gene, are they? Things like intelligence or personality.
No, far from it. Most complex human traits, height, weight, intelligence, personality, susceptibility to common diseases like heart disease or diabetes are polygenic, meaning they're influenced by many genes acting together, often interacting with each other, and, crucially, with environmental factors.
So how do scientists study the inheritance of these complex traits, especially in humans, where you can't exactly do breeding experiments?
Well, in animals, selective breeding has been very informative. You can breed rats for traits like maze-running ability, for instance. And if, over generations, you can breed lines that are consistently maze-bright and maze-dull, that strongly suggests a hereditary influence on that ability. For humans, since breeding experiments are obviously unethical, we rely heavily on other methods, particularly twin studies and adoption studies.
Twin studies comparing identical and fraternal twins.
Exactly. Identical or monozygotic, twins develop from a single fertilized egg that splits, so they share 100% of their genes. Fraternal or dizygotic twins develop from two separate eggs fertilized by two separate sperm, so they're genetically no more similar than ordinary siblings, sharing about 50% of their genes on average. By comparing the similarity of identical twins on a particular trait, say IQ score or personality measure, with the similarity of fraternal twins, researchers can estimate the heritability of that trait, the proportion of variation in the population that seems attributable to genetic differences.
And what do these studies typically find?
Consistently, identical twins show greater similarity than fraternal twins across a wide range of traits, including intelligence, specific cognitive abilities, personality dimensions like extroversion or neuroticism, and even susceptibility to disorders like schizophrenia. This holds true even when identical twins have been reared apart in different environments, providing powerful evidence for genetic influence.
And adoption studies, comparing adopted children to their biological and adoptive parents.
Yes, another powerful design. If adopted children resemble their biological parents more than their adoptive parents on a particular trait, despite having little or no environmental contact, that again points to genetic factors.
And there was a surprising finding mentioned about adoption studies. Something about genetic influences getting stronger over time.
Ah, yes, that's a really intriguing finding. Some studies suggest that as adopted children grow older, say approaching adolescence or adulthood, their resemblance to their biological parents on certain traits, like general cognitive ability or verbal ability, actually tends to increase, while resemblance to their adoptive parents may decrease.
That seems counterintuitive. You'd think the environment would have more impact over time.
It does seem counterintuitive, but it suggests that genetic predispositions might exert a stronger influence later in development, perhaps as individuals gain more autonomy and actively select environments that are compatible with their genetic tendencies. It's as if genetic potential unfolds or finds expression more fully over time.
Wow. And scientists are trying to link specific traits to specific genes now, right? Molecular genetics.
Yes, molecular genetics aims to identify specific genes or gene variations associated with particular behavioral traits or disorders. There have been some reported links, like a variant of a dopamine receptor gene being associated with novelty seeking, or genes related to endorphin release being linked to alcoholism risk. However, it's really crucial to be cautious with these findings. Initial reported links sometimes turn out to be weak, non-replicable, or much more complex than initially thought. The D2 dopamine receptor gene and its link to alcoholism is a good example where early excitement faded with more research. Single genes rarely determine complex behaviors.
Which brings us back to the environment. Genes aren't destiny.
Absolutely not. This is a critical point. Genetic potential is profoundly and continuously influenced by the environment throughout life. Genes and environment constantly interact. For instance, the tendency to develop type 2 diabetes certainly has a hereditary component, but whether it actually manifests often depends heavily on environmental factors like diet, exercise, and obesity.
And mental health, too, like schizophrenia.
Yes, schizophrenia has a strong hereditary component. Your risk is much higher if you have a close relative with the disorder, but it's not 100% genetic. Environmental factors like prenatal complications, early life stress, or substance use significantly shape whether a genetically predisposed individual actually develops the full-blown disorder.
So it's this ongoing, intricate dance between nature and nurture.
Precisely. Genes might set certain potentials or predispositions, maybe define a range of possibilities, but the environment from the womb onwards, including experiences, learning, social interactions, culture, determines where within that range an individual actually ends up. It's a dynamic, lifelong interplay.
Okay, finally, let's touch on a really fascinating, maybe cutting-edge area that bridges action, perception, and emotion.
Yeah.
Mirror neurons and empathy. How do we recognize what others are doing or feeling?
Yeah, this is a really interesting debate. How do we understand others' actions and emotions? One idea, the visual hypothesis, suggests it's purely cognitive. We see the action, we analyze it, we infer the goal or intention based on past experience. Purely observational.
Okay, see and deduce. What's the alternative?
The motor hypothesis, which gained huge traction with the discovery of mirror neurons. This suggests that when we observe someone else perform an action, our own motor system becomes activated as if we were performing a similar action ourselves. These specialized mirror neurons, first found in monkeys but believed to exist in humans too, fire both when the individual performs a specific action, like grasping an object, and when they simply observe another individual performing that same action.
So watching someone grab a cup activates the grabbing neurons in my own brain.
That's the idea. It implies a kind of direct first-person understanding of the action, mediated by our own motor system. We understand the action because, on some neural level, we feel like we're doing it too. It creates this direct, embodied connection.
And does this extend to emotions? How we understand how someone else feels?
That's the really exciting extension. The debate parallels the action one. Is understanding another's emotion purely cognitive? I see they're crying, therefore they must be sad. Or is there a more direct mapping mechanism, maybe a mirror mechanism for emotions? There's compelling evidence for the latter. For instance, studies looking at the emotion of disgust. They found that the same brain areas, particularly a region called the anterior insula, become active both when we personally experience disgusting odors and when we simply observe other people's facial expressions of disgust.
Wow. So seeing disgust triggers disgust in me neurologically.
It strongly suggests a direct mapping mechanism. Observing an emotion in someone else triggers the neural activity associated with feeling that same emotion in ourselves. It creates a kind of biological bridge for sharing emotional states.
But hang on, just mirroring someone's emotion, is that the same as truly understanding them or empathizing? Sometimes seeing someone upset just makes me upset without really helping them.
That's a critical distinction. You're pointing to the difference between emotional contagion and true empathy. Both might involve some kind of mirroring of an affective state triggered by observing another person. But emotional contagion is often considered more automatic, maybe even primitive. You catch the emotion, but you might remain focused on your own resulting feelings. It's fundamentally self-centered. Their distress is making me distressed.
Right. Whereas empathy?
True empathy is generally seen as more complex and profoundly other-centered. It involves not just sharing the feeling, but also being aware that the other person is the source of the feeling, understanding their perspective, and often includes a motivation to help or comfort them. It requires distinguishing self from other.
So can simple mirror neurons explain that complex empathy?
That's where the debate lies. While strict automatic mirroring might underlie basic emotional contagion, it's less clear if it's sufficient for true complex empathy. Empathy often seems to involve higher-level cognitive processes layered on top of any basic mirroring, things like perspective taking, understanding the context theory of mind, regulating one's own emotional response. For example, affective pain mirroring, activating our own pain circuits when seeing someone else in pain, seems to be subject to top-down modulation. Our attitude towards the person, whether we think their pain is justified, our own expertise, like doctors, can all influence how much mirroring occurs.
So it's not just automatic reflection.
Exactly. This more cognitively loaded mirroring, as some call it, can indeed contribute to empathy, but then it's arguably not pure automatic mirroring anymore. It suggests that while our biology provides these fundamental mechanisms for connection, like mirror systems, our sophisticated cognitive abilities build upon them to create truly nuanced human experiences, like compassion, understanding, and genuine empathy.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've taken today. Really through the biological foundations of psychology, from the intricate firing of a single neuron all the way up to the specialized functions of the brain's hemispheres.
Yeah.
And then considering the profound dynamic influence of genetics and the environment. We've really explored the intricate hardware, haven't we? The biological machinery that underpins every thought, every feeling, every action we take. It really shows how deeply physical our mental landscape truly is.
Absolutely. And hopefully we've seen that understanding this complex biological system isn't just, an academic exercise. It's absolutely fundamental to understanding ourselves at the deepest level. From seeing how neurotransmitters can impact our mood and behavior day to day, to understanding how specific brain regions contribute to our unique experiences, our memories, even our capacity for connecting with others through empathy. What we've unpacked today provides a really powerful framework. It helps us comprehend not just the what of human experience, but also starts to get at the intricate why.
So let's leave our listeners with a final thought. Given how intimately our biological hardware is linked to who we are, the very essence of you, and how much our environment, everything from our earliest experiences to our current relationships, continuously shapes that biological potential, what does this ongoing intricate dance between nature and nurture truly mean for your capacity for change, for learning, and for, well, truly becoming the you aspire to be?